Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. This is the second of what'll probably be 3 videos for my finished reads since the last time I posted. So gosh, it feels like it's been like a month. I don't think I've done it for December yet. So it is about, next week is Christmas. I hope to get these videos up before that point, but we shall see. The next book that I want to cover was another new book that I ended up reading for the Christie's Missing Readathon. So one of the challenges was also to read a book that was mentioned by Christie. And this book is not only mentioned in her autobiography, I believe, but it was also mentioned apparently in The Clocks by Poirot as a really great mystery. And this was a mystery that Agatha Christie really enjoyed prior to her starting to write. I mean, she read the people like Sherlock Holmes, she read the Leavenworth case, she read Chesterton. So she had a whole variety of mystery authors and other authors that she was exposed to. But this mystery in particular apparently was one that she really enjoyed. And it is the mystery of the Yellow Room. Although actually, I think the Leavenworth trial might have been mentioned in The Clocks. I can't remember where the mystery of the Yellow Room was mentioned, besides in popular autobiography. But this is actually written by the same author who wrote, The Phantom of the Opera, which I actually tried to read Phantom of the Opera at one point. I'm going to have to try again because I want to say I was in college, and it really wasn't a great period of time for me to start reading anything of any substance. I was trying to absorb a lot of information with nursing school and reading a classic that I didn't find necessarily easygoing, specifically since I was a big fan of the musical. I was actually introduced to the musical in college. So when it didn't exactly line up with Phantom of the Opera musical, I think I just wasn't in the right headspace to properly take in that musical, or take in that book. Although I was in a good headspace to take in The Mies, which I was also introduced to was I introduced to that one as a musical? I might have been introduced to the book first. That might be why I absorbed that one in a different way. I can't remember. That's too long ago. Anyway. But Gaston Leroux, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right because I don't have any, I can't do a French pronunciation to save my life. But he apparently wrote, I want to say this is a 3-book series. This is the first one. And then, because I've seen collections that have the 3 books, I believe it's 3 books, in this series, and then it'll tack on to it The Phantom of the Opera, which I believe is probably his most famous one, and then probably after that, The Mystery of the Yellow Room. So I don't know how good this translation is. As far as I know, this is the easiest one available. I couldn't find a whole lot of information on it. I probably could have done more research, but I actually didn't find a whole lot in the way of different copies of this book. So I honestly don't know about the quality of the translation. There is a note within the book that states that it was translated where like attacker is translated like to murderer, even though, spoiler alert, no one is killed. You find that out very early on, so that's not really spoiling anything. But so they will be using throughout the book murderer, even though no one was murdered. It's a mystery. It's an early locked room mystery, not a murder. But yeah, this was you can tell where Agatha Christie was influenced. I have a couple places marked where I can see character types. Like, for one thing, her main character or Poirot, who is her most well-known character probably, and the one about whom she wrote the most. She wanted him to be a different kind of detective than your typical. So she didn't want another policeman, or she didn't want a Sherlock Holmes type. She wanted somebody who wouldn't necessarily be taken seriously. Kind of like your main character here. I had to find the way to say his name. It's hold on. Joseph Rouletabille. Oh, God heavens, I can't. Joseph Rouletabille. Joseph. Joseph, whose last name I cannot say. Basically, the idea is that his head is round like a billiard ball. Or I've also seen it translated like a bullet, round like a bullet. So I guess because they were rounder at that time. Because this was written in 1889. Wait, I'm sorry. It was written in 1907. Yeah. So, yeah. It was written in 1907. So I'm not sure what the both looked like at that point, but I've heard it translate both as him having his head as round as a billiard ball or round like a bullet, which makes you think of Poirot with his egg-shaped head, like another unusually shaped head. Now, where Poirot is a retired Belgian police officer who ends up becoming a private detective in England, Joseph Roundhead, sorry, Joseph, he, when you first meet him in this book, he is, or for the majority of this book, because actually when you meet him, he's even a couple years younger than when he is for the majority of the book. But for the greater part of this book, he's an 18-year-old reporter, newspaper reporter, and that is your detective. Now, he has his own Hastings-like character, and actually the narrator voice sounds a bit like Hastings to me versus like a Watson. Maybe somewhere in between the two. He might be a bit smarter than Hastings, but he does get his feelings hurt in some of the ways that Hastings will. But his sidekick type character is a young lawyer, older than this kid, but a young lawyer. And so that there's that kind of, you have that unusual detective aspect, which is what Christie wanted to go for, partially influenced by this book. And even though they're completely different areas of the age spectrum, then also there are different points like where I have other things marked. Let me open a marker. So they have a character in here called Larson. Now, I've heard some say that they believe that some of Poirot's egoism you see in the Larson character. I would argue that your main character, Joseph Roundhead, sorry, I'm just going to call him that because I can't say the French. So he has enough egoism and peacockness on his own, which is actually somewhat more insufferable considering the fact he's an 18-year-old kid versus Poirot, who has years of experience behind him. And whereas some of the egoism for Poirot is something that is natural to him, he also does put on some of that to have people kind of look down on him when it works for him, or when sometimes having them see him as a mountebank works to his advantage. So he uses people's perceptions of him to do what he needs to do. Now, Joseph here, he does have Poirot's flexible relationship with the truth when he needs to get information, and he has no problems being manipulative or tricky, being a bit tricksy to get the information that he needs. So he and Poirot do share that, as well as the egoism, in spite of being on different points in the age spectrum. Like I said, I feel like it can be a little bit more forgivable. I guess on the one hand, it's more forgivable for Poirot because he's older and actually has the long years of experience to point to. But you can then say, well, Joseph Roundhead, he's only 18, so you think you know a heck of a lot more when you're 18. So, that could also play into some of that attitude. But so I don't necessarily agree with the biography that I read that mentioned that some people try to point to this Larson character as being like, that's where you see the egoism for Poirot. Honestly, if you read Murder on the Links, there is a young detective, actually. Well, not young, younger than Poirot, in his prime otherwise, but younger than Poirot detective whose name is Gerard. And he has that kind of egoism that Larson more has, like where you're not willing to share information and you have it like where you're making it more of a competition than a teamwork thing. So if anything, I would say, if you were to say that Christie had a character that was influenced by Larson, that would be Gerard from Murder on the Links. Even though it's not a one-on-one, I wouldn't say that they're a lot alike, just that if you were to say any character of hers was influenced, I would say it was that one. But the one part that I thought was fun, that I was reading it through and I was like, oh, wow, that just smacks you in the face if you read Poirot. There's a point where Joseph is talking to his narrator friend, so his lawyer friend, and he says, their intelligence would have produced about the same result if nature had forgotten to furnish their brain pan with a little gray matter. And that just makes me think of Poirot's little gray cells, which I thought was great. Now, don't know how accurate this translation was or is. I don't know if this is a translation Agatha Christie was reading. I do know she did read French, so she might have read it in the original French, in which case, who knows how much of that little gray cells, little gray matter might actually have been in the original French. But I just found that to be a fun comparison, or just a fun similar use of turn of phrase. And there's other things throughout where, yes, you might see things that kind of feel Christie-ish, like it's not completely unique to Christie or any particular author, but the use of diagrams, drawn diagrams to show what the area is where you're having the mystery take place. I think that might be fairly common in quite a few mysteries, but Agatha Christie makes use of that a lot. And this is used, I want to say, several times within this book. So the other nice thing about this book is we do have, I guess these were some drawings that were done in the, I want to say it was 1907 French edition. So these drawings are from the original book, which I thought was kind of cool. Also, if in the very front of the book, you have a 1920 poster for the play in France. So obviously it's going to be in French. And then at the end, you have a 2-page end piece from the American 1919 film. So there we go. And our actors that we're looking at, you have Ethel Gray Terry playing your main female character. You have George Cal, Edmund Elton, and Lauren Raker. think Lauren is a guy, Lorin. Now, I am wondering if they age up the Joseph character because he's only 18 in the book, or that they're just doing the Steve McQueen playing in the Blob thing where it's just like, pretend this grown man is 18 who like looks like he's old enough to have an 18-year-old. But so I don't know if they did something like that. Now it kind of looks like, no, I'm not sure. Maybe this guy could be who they intended to play Joseph. I think they must have aged up his character because none of those guys particularly look like they're young enough to be his character. But anyway, I found this to be a fun book. I do feel like if I look back, yes, some of the breadcrumbs were laid. I don't know that they were laid quite as well as Christie lays her breadcrumbs in her books, but I can see where she was influenced. I can see why this book made her start thinking and go, oh, I can do this too. It's the puzzle aspect that she enjoyed because she was a person who did puzzles and she had that kind of brain that just worked in that way. But I enjoyed this book. Would I put it on the same level as a Christie for my enjoyment? Not necessarily, but honestly, I was surprised how enjoyable of a read it was. I tried initially to read it on Kindle, and I found it very hard going on Kindle. I don't know if the translation was poorer on Kindle. It felt like there was a lot more run-on sentences. It was hard to kind of focus on it. So I broke down and got the physical form because I had a free Kindle book, but I just could not focus on it. Once I got the physical book, the book just went like that. I think I read this in a day. Now, granted, most of my books, I read like 2 books a day, at least, during this read-along. But I read this in a day, and I enjoyed it. It was a very quick and easy read. Honestly, the only reason why it took as long as it did is I believe this was the day where I had a really bad migraine that I kind of slowed up the ending for me. I almost took my PRN migraine medicine twice because usually I don't have to do that. So that kind of slowed me down on this a little bit. Otherwise, I would have probably finished it quite a bit earlier. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. Even if people said this might not be the best translation, it translates well enough over that it doesn't feel like it is a plodding read. It feels like it flows easily. I will probably have to do research to see who's best translator, but I couldn't even find who the translator was, and I tried researching because I wanted to put on my library card that I put in my book journal, and I couldn't find, I even was like, what's the one most common translator? What's the translator for the most, popularly distributed translation? And I just could not find a name of any translator. So if anyone knows who either translated specifically the Seawolf Press illustrated classic edition of the Mystery of the Yellow Room, or if you know the name of maybe who translated the most well-distributed translation of the Mystery of the Yellow Room, I'd be very, very interested. Sorry, my mouth is very interested in hearing who the translator is because I couldn't find it. So that's it for the Mystery of the Yellow Room. Thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you again next time. God bless. Bye.